In this lecture, we are going to cover pay determinants, or what are those factors or variables that help us understand or explain why people are paid differently in different jobs, and determining things like how much of a pay raise do people get and why are people getting those pay raises, for example. So our goal is really centered around the concept of individual equity. So in other words, our goal is to ensure fairness of how pay is administered and distributed to individual employees working similar jobs in the same organization. Now, when it comes to ensuring individual equity, we can describe and define individual equity as follows. Individual equity refers to fairness of how pay is administered and distributed to individual employees working similar jobs within the same organization. Now, typically differences in pay should be attributable to differences in factors like performance level, seniority level, experience level, and so forth. These are some common examples of pay determinants here. So performance, seniority, and experience being common examples there. So here's another example that I pulled from the Smith book, which is about which covers statistics in compensation contexts and organizations. And so, for instance, you might have hypothesized pay raise determinants such as your pay raise percentage for any given employee is going to be dependent in some part on their education level, which might be defined as having or not having a college degree, the time that they've spent in their pay grade within the organization, their performance level, and perhaps their position in that pay grade or that pay range, which means that if people are towards the high end of their pay range or pay grade, there's going to be probably limited space for them to move up, or even no space if they've reached the max pay for that pay grade or that pay range. So first we want to hypothesize and come up with, what do we think the model is? What are the factors that contribute to the percentage of pay raise that someone receives? Because ultimately, in many cases, these are going to be at the discretion of a single manager or multiple managers who decide how much a single employer or group of employees are going to receive with respect to their pay raise. Now, typically, we do not want protected class variables such as sex, race, ethnicity, age, and so forth to be associated with the pay raise or the amount. So we would not typically want, in other words, protected class variables to be statistically significant pay determinants when it comes to things like raises, merit-based pay increases, variable pay allotments or distributions such as bonuses and spot awards and things like that. We typically do not want protected class variables to be associated with those. Now, when it comes to empirically identifying what the pay determinants are for a particular outcome of interest, such as percent raise that we allocate or distribute to different employees, now, this is where we determine how well are we actually doing things in practice. And this is one way of determining how well we're actually adhering to our pay philosophy, our pay policies, and our pay structure and other guidelines. Now, when it comes to empirical identification of the pay determinants, a couple common approaches include simple linear regression and multiple linear regression models, where, just as a quick reminder, simple linear regression refers to a regression-based model where obviously we assume a linear association between the two variables, but we just have two variables, one predictor variable, one outcome variable, whereas a multiple linear regression model means that we have two or more predictor variables and a single outcome variable. So we can use those regression-based approaches to empirically identify what are the determinants of pay in our organization for all jobs, a set of jobs, or whatever the case might be. And so this can be really, really useful for determining if we have any drift with respect to how we're actually adhering to pay policies, our pay philosophy, and so forth, and if there's anything potentially unethical or anything potentially illegal that might be going on, such as if we find evidence that people from different protected class groups, such as different race or ethnic groups, might be paid significantly different from one another, or might receive different types of raises or different amounts of raises, for example. So this wraps up the lecture on pay determinants.